I'm going to help you find the perfect budget grinder because I've bought hundreds of them. So does that make me an expert? Bloody oath it does. So let's find out which one is perfect for you. The first grinder I want to tell you about is called the Breville Smart Grinder Pro. It's an Australian brand, Breville, and it's one of the most cheapest coffee grinders and probably the best all-rounder grinder that's available on the market today. Whether you're in the US or Australia or any other country, if you can get access to the Breville Smart Grinder Pro, I really do recommend it. It's about $199 US, about $250 to $299 Australian. But in terms of being the most all-rounder grinder, I really think it sits at the top. It features a huge LCD bright backlit display, which shows you all the different types of variables that you need. It's got your timer. It tells you the espresso grind size. It also has two different options to adjust for a single cup or a double cup. But of course, you can set these to anything. So maybe you want to only dose about 18 grams out, and then the other one you want to do a 20-gram one. You could set it for that as well. It doesn't have to be a single cup and a double cup, but that's just there for your ease of use. It has 40mm stainless steel conical burrs, which are great for grind consistency, and it doesn't overheat too much. It has 60 grind settings overall, and 16 of those are specifically for your espresso grind, which is great because espresso is so much harder to get the grind size correct. It's so much more fussy and fiddly that you really do want to have as many steps as possible, or even a stepless grinder, to be able to hone in on that perfect size grind. So even if the 16 grind settings aren't enough for your espresso, you generally find that between 1 or 2, it does give you a good result. And if you really cannot find that perfect size, like you're sitting on the finest grind and it's still not fine enough for what you want, well, then you can actually open up the lid, take out the hopper, and underneath you can adjust the internal burr set to go either finer or coarser to give you a few more steps of variation to really hone in that grind. Now, obviously that's a backup reserve spot, but you can actually do that if you want to. Most of the time you're going to find the perfect grind, or as close to perfect, between those integers of 8, 9, 9, 10, or whatever the number is that you end up on. One of the best things about this grinder is that it has a cradle for your portafilter. Whether you have the Breville dual boiler with the 58mm portafilter, or if you have the Bambino or the Express or the Pro, then you can get the 54mm cradle, and that actually helps hold the portafilter in there, so you don't have to really worry about holding it, and it doses the perfect amount straight into the portafilter. And if you want to, because it's touch sensitive, you can just nudge it a bit more and dose it a little bit more if you feel like it's just underdosed it a bit and you just want to top it up, and you can stop it, press start and press pause. And even if you want to, you can use the basket and dose it straight into that if you're going away. It has an airtight container that you could take with you if you're going hiking for the day or going for an overnight camping trip. Now, it does clump a little bit. This is one of the downsides with the Pro, is that it clumps. It's very slow, and you notice that occasionally it drops these big blops of coffee in there. So I would recommend getting a distribution tool like a WDT and just whisking that coffee up, declumping and decrushing all of those coffee grinds into nice even granules. But one of the greatest things about this grinder is that, let's say you're trying to get 18-gram dose and you know that your fineness of the grind is a little bit too coarse. Well, you can adjust that and then adjust the timer up and down. So if you have coarser grinds, it's going to grind faster than if you have finer grinds. So when you do adjust it to be coarser, make sure you do adjust that timer just down a fraction as well. But you can see that, and then you can program it into your machine. So the majority of the time, it's always going to deliver that 18-gram dose every single time, give or take. And yes, there is a bit of grind retention with this machine. So that means that some of the grinds doesn't always make it into your portafilter and gets caught up in the chute, which means the next shot will have some of those old grinds in it. Most consumers these days are more focused on convenience, so they're not worried about getting that zero retention. They don't mind, and often the time is that you'll be able to fill up your hopper with 450 grams of beans, which is not what I recommend. I recommend just pouring in enough for the day. But if you really want to, you can store up to 450 grams of coffee in there because it is semi-airtight and it won't degas too quickly. And while it is a really good single doser grinder, because it doesn't popcorn too much, which means the coffee beans don't fly out everywhere and they don't get broken into big chunks, it is really convenient for people who want to use it as a single doser, but also for those who aren't really interested in weighing in and out their beans. With all of that said, I give the Breville Smart Grinder Pro an 8.9 out of 10. Now, the Breville Dose Control Pro is exactly almost identical housing to the Breville Smart Grinder Pro. And the real only difference is the fact that you don't have that LCD screen. It's still a 40mm conical burst set. Most of the housings are the same. The clumper is exactly the same inside. But on the front, you just have a timer. And on the side, you have your grind size control. So that's all you have to play around with. There's no settings. You can't program it into the 1 or 2 cups like you can on the Breville Smart Grinder Pro. But if you're on a super tight budget and you want to save $50 to $70, then the Dose Control Pro is perfect for all your needs because it gives you almost the exact same grind as the Smart Grinder Pro. I give the Dose Control Pro a 7.9 out of 10, only because sometimes that LCD screen is so much easier to use, but I really understand it that if you're on a tight budget, that's the way to go. Now, there's a few of you who are probably watching this thinking, well, I'm about to buy this Barista Express by Breville, which has the grinder built in, and from all reports, it's the exact same grinder as the other two that you've just described. And whilst that is true, it is the same grinder, it's virtually the same, just built into the machine. I strongly suggest that you do not buy the all-in-one machines. I know it's convenient. I know it's probably a little bit cheaper, and you walk into a place like Harvey Norman or Kmart or wherever that sells it, and you can buy your machine and then go home and you can start making coffee that afternoon. That is so true. But let me tell you this, and then you can tell me if you disagree. What happens when you add moisture, heat, and electronics? Over time, you get corrosion. And on top of that, the tiny, fine amount of dust particles from your coffee grinds, and there's no coffee grinder in the world that can completely seal in the chamber to escape those really fine powders escaping into the rest of the mechanics. Add all of that together, and one of them is going to fail over time. It might be your grinder, but more often than not, it's going to be the machine. And then what? You're going to have a 2-foot grinder sitting on your bench next to your 2-foot machine, just so you don't have to buy another grinder. So yes, it is convenient to have them all in one, but let me tell you, grinders are a simple beast. They really only need to do one thing, and they do it well, and they do it consistently, and they can do it for a very long time. So without all of the moisture and the heat from the coffee machine interfering, a grinder might last you 10, 15 years, if even like a cheap one like the Breville Smart Grinder Pro. You might have to change the blades, but mostly they will just continue to operate until that motor eventually burns out. I have a Iberitao Challenge that I bought 20-something years ago that's still going, and yeah, it doesn't make the best grind, and the blades are very, very dull now, but it's still going, and I bought that for $200 20 plus years ago. Do yourself a favor, buy a Breville Bambino, buy a separate Smart Grinder Pro, and you will thank me in the long run. But stay away from the all-in-one built-in grinders, or else just have the machine for 5 years and then maybe it becomes a secondary grinder or a paperweight. But tell me what you think. If you have a machine like this, or you've bought an all-in-one grinder machine before, I think you'll agree that it's not worth the pain in the long run. And hey, if this is the first time that you've watched one of my videos, I hope that I've given you enough value already to be able to ask for a subscribe. But even if you aren't ready to subscribe to my channel, I'd love to know what brought you to this video. So drop me a comment in the section below and let me know, were you just starting your journey into coffee grinders? Have you already bought one and you want to make sure that you've made the right decision by watching this video? Or are you just so bamboozled by the amount of options out there and have no idea where to begin, and you want to start narrowing it down? I'm really keen to know what brought you to this video, so please let me know, and let me know what other videos you'd like to see in the future, because I've done so many videos all helping people at home make the best coffee on whatever machine they have, and I'd really love to know what other advice I could give you in the future. Let's move on to the next grinder. Next up is the Baratza Encore, which is also owned by Breville. It was bought a couple of years ago by Breville, but it has the quality from the original Baratza manufacturing in Seattle. They are a fantastic grinder, and I think they're probably considered one of the highest quality grinder, especially in terms of the grind consistency. Really unbeatable. However, a lot of the people who use this grinder are making Chemex, filters, pour overs, cold press, French press, those sort of larger grind size, and not really specifically for espresso. Although it can do espresso, but you lose some of the convenience. You can't get the portafilter in there. You have to dose it into a container first. So it's not great for dosing correctly into your portafilter. It doesn't have a timer. It's just a continuous button that just grinds. So you really do have to weigh it out on the top, which is a bit of an inconvenience, especially because it has a hopper. You'd think that because it has a built-in hopper, that you would more use it to just fill up your beans and then grind it and dose out as you go. But because it doesn't have a timer built in, you have to guess how much you're pushing into your portafilter or into the container beforehand, which makes it a little bit annoying because you're often going to go over and then you're going to have a waste of coffee grinds just sitting there maybe until the next day. And that's not ideal. But for $149 and 299 Australian dollars, it's a good buy if you're willing to work around those inconsistencies. However, there is another model which is specifically designed to get espresso coffees. It's the Baratza Encore ESP model, and it's about $50 more US than Australian, and it is specifically designed to give you those control over the espresso grinds, because these grinders only have 40 grind settings, so it's a stepped grinder. It only goes up to 40. 20 of them are for your espresso, even though it's not the most convenient machine for espresso. Like, it doesn't have a portafilter cradle. You have to dose into a dosing cup. It's only one extra step to transfer it into your portafilter. The M2 40mm conical burrs are fantastic. It's not quite as good as stainless steel, but still great materials in there, and will last you about 10 plus years anyway on an average use. The Encore ESP is kind of Baratza's response to the market, because when people wanted to make espresso in the original Encore, it just didn't get the grinds and it's fine enough to be able to do with that. So they brought out a specific burr set to be used for that. And I think it's done well, but they have overlooked a few things, which, like I said, it's not a timer. So it doesn't, you're just going to have to eyeball it, or you're going to have to weigh it in and then weigh in the beans before you use it. Again, it's not the end of the world for the really fluffy, perfect grind size, consistency, and long-lasting burrs. It's worth it, but I wish they had have just taken those extra few steps to create a really easy and convenient model for your newbie baristas. However, saying that, it's a beautiful looking machine, comes in white and black, so you can match it with your coffee machine if you like, as opposed to the Breville Smart Grinder Pro and the Dose Control Pro, which only come in that brushed aluminium look. I think if you're wanting to match it with your machine, then you might go this way. The other thing that I really dislike about this machine is that the hopper is actually also connected to the grind adjuster. So it can happen accidentally. I've done this many times where you go to take the lid off and you put your beans in, and as you do so, you accidentally twist it and then you've upset your grind settings. And if you're not paying attention, you might not remember exactly what setting you had it on, and then you're going to waste coffee dialing it back in to find that perfect setting. Again, not the end of the world, but it's things like that I really wish they had it just fixed when they brought out the espresso model. And for that reason, I only give it a 7.2 out of 10 if you're an espresso drinker and you're wanting to use it on an espresso machine, an 8.2 out of 10 if you're drinking other drinks like your pour overs and filters and French press and all those sorts of things, because it is, again, at the end of the day, about getting that perfect grind. Now, Baratza also make another whole model range called the Setti. And there are 3 models in this range, and I really think these are the ones for the espresso drinkers. But you're going to have to work out whether your budget can jump that far, because it's not a small increment, it's almost double the price. And I'm going to start with the base model, which is the Setti 30, which if you're really into your espresso, I would probably skip this model, because 30, it only gives you, as it says, 31 settings, and don't ask me why they didn't call it the 31, but they give you 31 different grind settings, and that's not quite enough, I think, for really honing in on your espresso grinds. However, the machine looks gorgeous. It's got a really unique shape, and I really rate the Setti grinders just on the looks alone, because it's kind of a talking point. If you have it on your kitchen, comes in, it looks like the Lamazocco Swan in a little way. It's just gorgeous. And the blades are an S1 40mm conical burr, which is probably one of the hardest steels there. S1 is a oil quenched steel, so it's very, very hard, meaning that your burrs are going to last for a very long time. It's a very durable machine. But at $299 US and $499 Australian, only giving you 31 grind steps to hone in your espresso, I feel like that's a little bit overpriced and limited on what it should be able to do. It doesn't even have a portafilter cradle. So again, you're going to have to dose into a dosing cup, not the end of the world. But the little LCD display is what I really love about it. It kind of reminds me of one of those old tape players from the 80s. It's got your pause, your stop, and your start buttons up and down for your different ones, but you can't actually program any of your settings into the machine itself. So what you need to do is go up to the next model, which is the 270. But as a grinder alone, the retention is really low and the coffee is just fluffy. It just really looks gorgeous. And yes, you might spill it over the sides a little bit because it does spray out a bit, but it's not the end of the world. I think most people who are watching this video, if you're wanting a espresso specific grinder, you're going to want to look at the 270. I give the Model 30 a 6.8 out of 10, and that's only because I think for an espresso drinker, it's just too limiting. And I really think they need to either reduce the price of their 270 down to make that the entry-level one, or just eliminate the 30 altogether. The Baratza Setti 270 is the best bang for buck if you're wanting to get that really high quality, consistent grind. The 270 is almost identical to the 30. However, instead of just having your 31 settings, it's got an extra 9 micro adjustments. So 9 times 30 equals 270. That's where it comes from. So it gives you the ability to really hone in on that perfect grind size. And on top of that, it has 3 programmable buttons, so you can set them to dose out exactly what you want in that time. It is a timer-based one, but the timer is so accurate, it can go down to 1/100th of a second, meaning that you can dose it out just enough to give you 1 or 2 particles more, as well as having a built-in portafilter cradle, which is obviously what everyone wants when you're waking up in the morning, to just be able to put the portafilter in, press the button, and then have your dose in there. Now, some will spill out on the side, so you do want to be careful about going too coarse, because the coarser you go, the more it fills up and the more spill off the edges, which means that you're not going to dose your portafilter exactly right. But for the price of $399 US and $590 Australian, it's a really excellent machine for, I think, anyone who's serious about upping their level, but still maintaining that budget. Just be aware though, with the burr sets, it is a single unit. When they manufacture it, it's all built into the one, so you will not be able to replace these burrs in the future, and that may or may not decide for you which way you go. So I give the Setti 270 an 8.8 out of 10 because I do believe that this is probably one of the best value grinders on the market. Now I'll cover quickly the next model up, which is the 270 WI, which is the grind by weight version of the 270. And the only real difference there is that instead of having to set your timer, you just need to adjust your grind coarseness. And that makes it so much easier because let's say you always want to have an 18.5 gram dose. And all you want to do is adjust the grind setting to make it finer or coarser. Well, now you don't need to worry about dialing it in with the timer to get that perfect dose. It will always deliver 18.5 grams, give or take, with down to like 0.1 of a gram. It's very, very accurate every time. So it's going to make your life a lot easier. However, I'm not going to talk about this too much because it really does jump up into the next level of budgets that I really think is no longer that budget. It's $599 US, about $750 Australian. And then there starts to be an argument for other grinders at that range. But still, for a grind by weight grinder, this is definitely worth the money. So I give it an 8.9 out of 10. Okay, now I'm going to tell you about Fellow Opus. The Fellow Opus is probably one of the best budget grinders for those of you who want to push the boundaries of your espresso. But I would also caution you, if you're new to being a home barista, this might not be the grinder for you, because whilst it really does compete with the Breville Smart Grinder Pro in terms of the price, it's packed full of features, but they are wanting you to become more of a single dose brewer where you don't put all your beans in there. And a lot of the things are leaning towards someone who's a little bit more of an aficionado or a little bit more experienced with making coffee. But it is such a beautiful looking machine, and it is packed full with a whole bunch of features that you probably didn't even realize were in there, that if you wanted to learn and grow, then this budget grinder will be perfect, because it only costs you $195 US and $300 Australian, and it comes in a gorgeous matte black and matte white finish to complement your machine at home and really make it stand out from the rest. It also has 40mm conical burrs, but they're dubbed the C640 burly burrs. I don't really know what that means, other than it seems to be a little bit more durable and a little bit more for consistency. If you're an engineer, maybe you can tell me why I should get excited for these C640 burly burrs, because I'm not. So on the front of the machine, there's 11 steps, and in between those 11 macro steps, there's micro steps as well. So whilst you don't get exactly 44 different steps, you get close to 33. There is also another alternative that can help you hone in your grind inside underneath the hopper. And it's very easy to adjust. You just press down on inside and you can just move them plus or minus. You can see there's about 11 to 13 steps inside. What it does is it offsets that grinder on the front so you can hone in on that perfect grind size. Now, this is not going to be for everyone, but it is there to give you a lot more variations of grind size so that you can find the perfect one for your machine. And the grinder is confusing at first. It took me a while to understand it, but after a while I did find I could really hone in a lot further than, say, your Breville smart grinders and the Baratza Encore. However, it is a single doser, so it may be able to fit 100 grams in the hopper, but what sets this apart is that the lid acts as a single or a double dose, depending on what you want to use it for. So the half here, you can fill it up, and it sits at about that 20 gram. It's not perfectly accurate, but you can eyeball it and level it and go, yeah, that's about 20 grams. Pop that in there and grind away. And the grind on this, I do actually really love. It is so uniform and so fluffy. You really notice the difference between the Breville Smart Grinder clumps and this machine. Like, it is night and day. So you will not be unhappy with the grind itself. However, it makes a fair amount of mess. It does have an anti-static thing up inside it, which is supposed to reduce the retention and reduce the static, so that it just drops easily into the doser. And it doesn't have a portafilter cradle, but I have found it's extremely messy. And you really find, like, I'll be knocking it, whacking it on the side, doing all sorts of things to try and get that last bit of grind out. And then I'll take the doser out, and then bloop, a blob will fall out. And I know that I've missed out on about half a gram of coffee in my dose. So I don't know why. And maybe they need to tweak a few things, and maybe in the Model 2 it will definitely come up, because the fellow Ode, there's 2 generations of that, and the second gen is superb. However, that's more for your filters and your mocha masters and the other different types of brewing, not for espresso. And it doesn't have a portafilter cradle. However, the dosing cup is really great, because it is just one extra step to go into your portafilter, and it does fit pretty much every portafilter size. And it's really nice, like, it fits neatly in there and knock it out. It's only one extra step, and I don't mind that at all. And I think if you're getting into that next level of espresso and you're really wanting to fine up your grinds and push it a bit further, then this sort of machine will really help you do that. Again, there's no timer. All you have is a button on the front, and you can press it multiple times to do 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or a 90 seconds, and maybe a continuous, but it's not really accurate enough to be able to dose, just pour beans in and then hope that you get 18 or 20 grams or whatever you're after out in that 30 seconds. In fact, most of the time, if you're doing anything above 20 grams, you're going to need more than 30 seconds to grind it. So you're going to have to do 2 lots of grinding. I do believe, however, that fellow will listen to the market, will listen to their mistakes and tweak this. And when Gen 2 comes out of the Opus, I think you'll see that will be the best budget grinder for espresso users out there on the market, bar none. But for now, I'm going to give it an 8.2 out of 10, because it's still a fantastic budget grinder, but I just don't know whether it's trying to push it to the aficionados or whether it's designed to be for the real newbies. Now, there's so many more grinders that I actually ran out of time to film these all. Obviously, the ones I missed were the Turin SK40, which is a fantastic single dose grinder. And there's a whole bunch of other grinders that I've probably missed. And if you think I've missed some, or you think I should do a review on these, pop them in the comment section below, because I might look at them and see if there's enough in there to do a part 2 of this budget. But anyway, I'll see you in my next video. I'm Ryan, your coffee coach, and as always, enjoy your brew.